Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good morning. Craig Miller, alcoholic. Sober today by the grace of a loving God, and any success I may be having is far more His success than it is my own. I can assure you of that. I sobered up on July 13th of 1994. Because of people like you in rooms not quite like this. You guys got a nice place here. Hugh, thank you for being a gracious host this weekend. I really appreciate all you've done. Tom and your committee, thanks for having me. I really appreciate that. This is not my favorite thing to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd much rather be back at my home group this morning, 12-stepping the newcomer. But I've been taught not to say no to AA. If the calendar's open and I don't have another commitment, my answer is yes. And so far that's worked out for me pretty well over the years. So thank you all for a wonderful convention this weekend. I know a lot goes into this, and these things do not conduct themselves. So thank you guys for all the work that you've done. It's good to be here this morning. It's good to see you guys and be sober on a Sunday morning. I've enjoyed meeting some of you guys over the weekend, and it's good to see my old friend James back there in the back. And he used to tape our assemblies for, years, and he turned it over to someone else not that long ago. And James, we miss you, brother. It's good to see you. And my crew from Louisiana, good to see you guys. And I want to thank my friend Jason for riding with me and coming this weekend. I have been going through a lot in my life over the last year or so, and last 6 months in particular. Holly talked about, sometimes, there's just pain in life. And, you can work the steps, you can have a sponsor, you can have a home group. And I have all of those, and I use them all. And I'm accountable to those things. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing, but I'm going through some stuff right now on a personal level that's really got my heart just sort of wrenched at the moment. And it's been that way for a couple months, and so I'm carrying some pain around with me right now. And I just need to tell you that and get it out of the way so that I can give a talk, okay? So I appreciate you guys being here this weekend and inviting me out here. If you're new, I need you to know I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and everything good in my life is a direct result of the membership that I have in it and the work that I've put into it and the grace of God that comes through it. I know that if I continue to talk to a sponsor, continue to sponsor and work with new people, keep service commitments, have a home group, do the actions contained in the 12 steps, and enjoy a little fellowship from time to time, I know God will see me through anything. That's been my experience since I've been here. And it don't always turn out the way I want it, and it don't always have a happy ending. But in the end, I get to stay sober, and I get to have a life that is beyond my wildest dreams. So if you're new, I didn't look like this when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys have cleaned me up a little bit. And I think usually right about now I'd be getting out of jail, to be honest with you. And Mom would be coming to pick me up yet again. And but I'll get to all that. Let's see, where to begin. I have 4 sisters and no brothers, resentment number 1. And we moved around a lot, resentment number 2. And, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. Don't hold that against me. I don't claim to be a Yankee. I was raised in the South. But I was born in Cleveland, and we lived there for a little bit, and then moved around all over the place. We lived in the Millers. My father, let me tell you about him for a second. My father's from Picayune, Mississippi. He went to Pearl River High School. I see Picayune in the house over there, yeah. And he was literally born in a log cabin where you could see through the walls. You could see through the floors to the dirt underneath. They didn't have plumbing till he was in the 8th grade. He didn't wear shoes till he was in the 7th grade. And had a big family, 8 brothers and sisters. And they did chores every morning on the farm before they went to the schoolhouse. And he walked to school barefoot, uphill both ways. And, I got the stories. And, but he's a good man. And for a long time I didn't have a relationship with him, but I do now. And he's a good man. But he went on to college to Mississippi State University after Vietnam, and got a degree in civil engineering. And when he got out of college, he started building malls back in the 70s and 80s when there was a shopping mall going up in every suburban neighborhood across the country, and we moved around and built malls. It takes about 1.5 to 2 years to build one, so we moved somewhere, build a mall, and then we'd pick up and move somewhere else and build another mall. So I have lived literally all over, and I'll circle back to that. On the other side of the equation, my mother's from Jamestown, New York. A little different than Picayune. And her first husband, she was married once before my dad. Her first husband was a Hells Angel, biker from New York. And my mother had hair down to her rear end back in the 50s and 60s. And she married him right out of high school and had a child, and he basically took her hostage, and she ended up running away from him in the middle of the night with her 2-year-old baby girl. And I don't think she's ever seen him since. And then my father was married twice before my mom. His second marriage, he had a best friend for like 9 years, and they decided to get married, and they lasted 6 weeks. And I could relate. And they lasted 6 weeks, and then they divorced. But then my mom and dad met on a blind date in New Jersey. And they just celebrated 40 years this past April while I was at the General Service Conference. And so I have 4 sisters and no brothers, and we were moving all over the country building malls. And so I've lived in 14 cities in 12 different states by the time I was 16 years old. I went to 4 elementary schools, 2 junior highs, and 4 high schools. The last 2 high schools were my fault. We'll get to that in a minute. But so I born in Cleveland. We lived in Picayune. We lived in Goshen, Mississippi. Built Singing River Mall down there, I think it was. And and then I've lived all over. I've lived in Dallas. I've lived in Houston, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Mission Viejo, California, and Clarksville, Tennessee, Florida, just, all over. Owensboro, Kentucky. And, that's fine. As a young kid, you don't really notice that, you know what I mean? So we'd move somewhere new, and I could just step out the front door, grab a football, and throw it to the first kid that walked by, and I had friends, just the way it goes at that age. But that was fine up until about age 12. After age 12, that story goes a little different when you throw that ball at somebody. And they're not quite as receptive. But I was a pretty good kid growing up. I loved sports. I played them all: football, baseball, basketball, soccer. I was particularly fond of baseball and football. I played those till I was about in the 10th grade. And now as an adult, looking back on all those places I've lived, I can tell you that that it's absolutely a wonderful childhood to remember. I can't sit here today and tell you that I'm an alcoholic because we moved around or because the family I was raised in. Those 4 sisters, one of them's married, lives in San Antonio, has 5 children, raising a beautiful family, married to a man in the military. My next oldest sister worked her way through college full-time, carrying 2 jobs, paid cash for it as she went, graduated with a perfect 4.0 grade point average. My next oldest sister went to Auburn University, partied for a little bit, turned a 4-year degree into a 5-year degree, and then when she got done, she got married, started a family, and now she owns her own business, and she does real well. And then my youngest sister She was probably the closest that came to being one of us from prolonged exposure to me. But she does real well now. She grew out of it, and she's in the banking business back in Montgomery, and she just had a baby boy. And I got to go to church with them last Sunday and see him get dedicated. And just a wonderful, wonderful family to grow up. You know, all four of them grew up right down the hall from me. You know, so what happened, you know? I don't know. It's not the family I grew up in, you know. That just didn't have nothing to do with it. I can tell you this, though. Alcoholism does run all through my family, my father's side in particular. And I have buried more family members, aunts, uncles, from alcoholism, overdose, heart attack, suicide. I mean, the Millers are full of alcoholism. It's just all over us. But my father's not an alcoholic, my mother's not an alcoholic, and none of my sisters are. And when we moved around a lot, you know, we didn't have extended family around us. You know, when mom's family's in Jamestown, New York, and dad's is in Picayune, Mississippi, and we're in Santa Fe, New Mexico, you know, we just didn't, you know, we didn't have that extended family experience that a lot of people have. You know, we just didn't go to grandma's house on Sunday. You know, she was across the country. But I can tell you that if there was a family I could pick to grow up in, it's the one I grew up in, you know. We weren't rich or anything, but, you know, there was love and we didn't want for much. And my parents didn't let any time go by without making sure we spent time together as a family. We were always going tubing down the Rio Grande River on the weekend, or driving up into the Rocky Mountains to go to the Continental Divide, or go skiing, or, you know, just whatever we could find to do. We'd hang out on an Indian reservation in Arizona or New Mexico, go over to Taos. You know, we would just do all kinds of stuff. And so now as an adult looking back on that, it's just a wonderful childhood to remember. It really is. So it's not, you know, the family I was raised in didn't cause my alcoholism. You know, I was a good kid for the most part growing up, you know, so my parents say anyway, up until about age 11 or 12. That's when the mischievousness began. You know, that's when parents would go to bed at night and I'd sneak out the window and go get some buddies, and we'd, you know, terrorize the neighborhood at all hours of the night. And that was the first time I got picked up by the police at 12 years old. One night we had snuck out, and I was thirsty. I went to this little 7-Eleven to get something to drink, and the store clerk took one look at this 12-year-old kid and looked at her watch and said, "You ain't got no business being out here at 3 o'clock in the morning." And she called the cops, and they picked me up, took me home, knocked on the door, and woke my parents up. But, you know, my dad was just sort of a boys will be boys kind of guy. And so as long as I was playing ball and had good grades, he just let things kind of ride, you know. And I was a good student. You know, I don't know if I was gifted in some way or not, but you know, I was that kid that could just show up to class, and as long as I showed up, I was a straight A student. I never had to crack a book. I never had to study. I never did homework. But I could ace tests, and I could show up and do some work in class. I wouldn't take it home with me, but I could do it while I was there, and I made straight A's all the way up until I was in the 10th grade. And except for one little stint in the 7th grade when I discovered it was no longer cool to make good grades, and so I intentionally made bad grades for a little while. And but then when we changed schools, I changed that, and I was back to straight A's because I figured out it was easier to keep my parents off my back that way. And so I was a good student and a pretty good kid for the most part, but, you know, the way it started for me was these neighborhood friends of mine. We'd get on our bicycles riding around the neighborhood, and if there was a garage door open with a refrigerator in it, we'd raid it and grab all the beer and wine coolers we could get our hands on, and we'd go off to our fort in the woods, and we'd, you know, drink beer and act cool, you know. And we'd go up to the grocery store or the gas station. That was back when they'd keep cigarettes out where you could actually reach them, you know. And we'd steal cigarettes and go off to the woods and drink beer and smoke cigarettes and act cool. And that's what we did. That was fun to us. And just sort of terrorize the neighborhood. And you know, no real consequences for any of that. Just kind of kid stuff, I guess. But when I was about 12 years old, I was living in Montgomery. And that's where the trouble began for me. And my dad lost his job, and we moved to Owensboro, Kentucky. And Owensboro was a great place. And there's not a lot to do there. There's some cornfields and some tobacco fields and a river, and that's about it. But Owensboro is a really cool town. I had a lot of fun there, and immediately got into sports and meeting people and I just had a great time there. But what we would do for fun on the weekends is throw keg parties out in the cornfields and tobacco fields, or we'd go down to the river and jump off the bridge. And the Ohio River runs through downtown Owensboro. It separates Kentucky from Ohio, or from Indiana. And I don't know how tall that bridge is, but I know I can count to about 5 Mississippi before my feet hit the water. And it was a good time. We had a lot of fun down there, but the cops kind of, they were on to us, and so we'd go down there at night, and the cops would show up with spotlights and kind of raid the place, and we'd go tearing off through the woods and through the fields, and I don't know if y'all have ever tried running through a cornfield, but I don't recommend it. You get skint up, from head to toe, and anyway, so I come out bleeding and I'm drunk, and so I'm getting picked up for public intoxication by this time, 13, 14 years old, and back then, they gave you PI tickets. They wrote you a ticket for being drunk in public. You didn't get handcuffs. And so I racked up a few PIs. I guess if you rack up enough of them, they'd slap the cuffs on you, but I think that only happened to me once, and I got a friend to come bail me out. But so anyway, no real consequences, just little stuff, and life was a lot of fun. I was having a blast. I really was. I was playing sports, had good grades, parents were leaving me alone, and I was partying, and I was 13, 14 years old, and we went to on New Year's Eve, somewhere around then. I don't remember if it was 14 years old or 15, but somewhere around then. It was New Year's Eve, and we went to my girlfriend's house where the night was going to begin, and a friend of mine had a bottle of Old Ezra sipping whiskey. I don't know about y'all. I don't sip whiskey very well, and we had been passing this bottle back and forth in the car, and we pull up to her house, and he hands me the bottle and says, I'm good. And so I look at the bottle. There's about half of it left, so I turned it up. Now, today, I weigh about 100 pounds more than I did then, okay? I was about 120 pounds at that time. And so drinking about 2/3 of that bottle of whiskey really did a number on me. And we did a few other outside issues, and I stepped out of the car, and I went into a blackout, my first blackout. And I don't know what happened. I don't know where I went. I don't know what I did. What I do know is that when I came to, it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was in 2 feet of snow. I was wearing nothing but a pair of shorts that weren't mine. And I didn't know what had happened and where I was, and nobody I knew was around. And I was in somebody's front yard. So I come to, and I'm looking around, and I see the lights on in this house that I'm in their front yard, and I said, that's where I'm going. So I go and knock on the door, and sure enough, the party was inside, and I knew people in there, but me and another friend had played the you're staying at my house, I'm staying at your house trick on the parents, so we could stay out all night, and my parents had figured it out, and they were out looking for me. And my dad had just bought this brand new Crown Vic, brand new, hadn't had it a week. Threw up in it a couple times on the way home. He came and found me, picked me up, and all I remember is the sun was coming up, and it was a Saturday, I think, and because people were like leaving to go to church on Sunday morning, and he's got his belt off, and he's whipping me, trying to drag me into the house, just mad as could be. And anyway, so that was my first blackout. I wish I could tell you it got better after that, but it didn't. I was a blackout drinker. And I didn't black out every time I drank, but I blacked out quite a bit. And, before a driver's license, it wasn't as dangerous. But once I turned 16, blackouts it was normal for me to come out of a blackout going 85 miles down the interstate, and, coming to, driving and not knowing where I'm at, where I'm going, who's this with me, I didn't know. That's how I drank. And, pretty scary stuff to look back on now. But at Owensboro, it was a lot of fun. And, no real consequences for any of that stuff. And Dad lost his job, recession hit, and we had to move somewhere. And my mom could get her old job back in Montgomery. And so we moved back to Montgomery, only we couldn't find a house in Montgomery. So we had to move to this little town outside of Montgomery called Millbrook. And, Millbrook's got, like 3 traffic lights, okay? And I ain't got no problem with a town like that, but I'd been living in Dallas, in Houston, and Santa Fe. I'd been going to schools with 2,500 kids where you could literally go, the whole time and not meet everybody that was there. And now I'm in Millbrook, Alabama. Small school, everybody knew everybody. Most of them were related, and I wasn't in. And it was a crushing blow to my ego. It really was. It was a crushing blow to have to start over again. And that was just before my 16th birthday. And I'd been looking forward to getting my driver's license in Owensboro. And matter of fact, I got so upset when my parents told me we had to move to Montgomery that I ran away. And the week we were scheduled to move, I just disappeared. And they had to move to Montgomery without me. And not knowing where I was, running around in Kentucky. And a couple weeks later, they were making calls, and my dad drove back up to Owensboro, and he found me at my girlfriend's house. I guess if you don't want to get caught when you run away, don't go there. But that's where I was, and they came and scooped me up and drug me back to Montgomery, kicking and screaming. And so I'm at Millbrook, and I don't want to be there. And it's my 10th grade year in high school, and I was having to start all over from scratch, and so I said, you know what, I know how to fix this. I went out behind the ag shop to smoke a cigarette that morning before school started, and I knew that's where the other smokers would be. And sure enough, there they were. And I met a few guys, and my parents were going out of town. By this time, since we had moved all over the country, my parents had family and friends everywhere, all over the United States, and so they were always traveling, and by this time I was old enough they didn't make me go with them, which meant my house was always open and available on weekends. So my house became the party house, and I got pretty good at throwing parties. And so I went behind the ag shop, met some guys, and said, hey, party at this address, this Friday night, and everybody showed up, and football team, baseball team, those guys came and brought people with them, and we got kegs, and I had friends, and it was on. And I went to Stanhope, I think a couple of weeks. I went to that high school for probably about a couple of weeks. And since I had lived in Montgomery before, I had friends there. And so I was skipping school in Millbrook to go to Montgomery and hang out with my friends, and I met a guy that worked at the Alabama State University Computer Lab. And so I took him my first report card from Stanhope, all right, the one that said Craig has not been to class in forever, and it's all, D's and F's and incompletes. And I took it to him, and he scanned it into the computer and had an imaging system. He was able to change the grades to whatever I wanted them to be. And so the D's and F's became A's and B's again, which is what my parents were used to seeing. So I took them that report card as the first report card from Millbrook, and that's the one they got. And so they thought everything was fine. And I literally went the whole school year doing that, the whole year. And, they send that last report card home in the mail. And I knew that. I remembered. So every day I was on this mission, check the mail. And but I had been in Montgomery, and me and another buddy had gotten arrested. We had gotten picked up for drinking, and we were at the Montgomery City Jail, and we had called his sister to come bail us out, and she came down there and got us out, and I'm looking at the clock, and it was just in time. I thought I could beat my mom home from work, and so I jump in my car and I mad dash it back to Millbrook, and I come speeding into the driveway, and turn into the driveway, and there she is standing in the driveway sorting the mail. And she opens up that report card and takes a look at it and says, "What's this?" I said, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, this says you haven't been to school and you got all D's and F's for the whole year." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. They've got it wrong. You've seen my real report card. There must be a mistake here." And she says, "Well, I guess we got to go up to the school." And I said, "I guess we do." So the next morning, I'm standing in front of the guidance counselor and the principal in their office, arguing with them over their real report card and my fake report card, trying to convince them mine's the right one. And they look, they're like, "Who are you? We don't even know who you are. Are you even enrolled here?" And anyway, I hung in there for a good half-hour debate, and finally I caved, and they had me. I was busted. So that night we had to have the family meeting. What are we going to do to fix Craig? If only I knew, right? And so we had the family meeting that night, and they're asking me what's wrong and what can they do, and I said I got it. The problem is Millbrook. I'm not going to school. I'm skipping every day because all my friends are in Montgomery. I'm skipping school so I can go to Montgomery and hang out with them. If y'all will move to Montgomery where I can go to school with my friends, I'll go. So my parents needed Al-Anon and said, sure, we'll go. So they got rid of that house and got another house in Montgomery, and we moved. And that's how we fixed that problem. But I had to go to summer school because at this point I had failed the 10th grade. Didn't go. So I had to go to summer school, and I went to summer school first day. Met a girl, and and she was 17. She had just finished her junior year, and she was going to summer school to finish her senior year early so that she could go to the University of Alabama and go to law school. Yeah, so she and I got close real fast, and we made a deal. She does my summer school work for me, and I get to go to the next grade. And so she went to summer school for me, and I partied all summer and drank, and ended up passing the 10th grade and got to go into the 11th grade. And guys, by this time, I'm not at school at all. I haven't been kicked out of the house yet, but I'm drinking around the clock. I got some serious problems with outside issues, and I'm a mess. I'm driving around with a 357 under my front seat, and the fun's beginning to wear off. And all this time, I was just a teenager having fun, so I thought. And it got to the point where when I tried to control it or want to quit, I couldn't. And so I'm starting to stare at that 357, wondering if I should pull the trigger or not. And I'm driving over bridges, wondering if I just turn the wheel a half a click, if I could just, hit that tree or go off the bridge and end it all. And I hung in there, and that summer, me and another girl had rented one of those rent-by-the-week hotel rooms and stayed there for several months. And the way we lived was Bonnie and Clyde. I would steal stuff and give it to her, and she'd take it back for the money. And eventually, after running hard like that for I don't know how long, several months, maybe a year, I caught a court case, another one, and I'd been on probation since I was like 13 from public intox or possession of this or that, minor stuff. But this time they had me for some serious theft charges, and I was going to do some time, and I used my alcoholic tongue to talk them into outpatient treatment, and more probation, and a weekend stop program where they put you in prison over the weekend and try to scare you to being good. Had to do that. And they scared me pretty good, actually, but not enough to keep me from drinking. But anyway, and I got banned from Walmart for 10 years. Yeah, pretty humbling to explain to the new guy that the guy 9 years sober couldn't go to Walmart. But I couldn't. And yeah, so anyway, I had this court case coming up, and I went, and anyway, that was the consequences of that, and I finished the 10th grade, and I'm moving on to the 11th grade now, and first day of school, my 11th grade year, I had discovered that Alabama had some wonderful cow pastures. And that grew mushrooms, and we had figured out how to boil those down into like this drink that was so potent, I could get pretty messed up, and so I did, and we had been drinking that morning, first day of school, and doing other things, and anyway, I went to school that morning, and everybody else was seeing the first day of 11th grade. What I was looking at was Disneyland. And they hand me that piece of paper that first day of school, tell me where my classes were, and I'm looking at the piece of paper trying to focus, and I look at it, and the words jumped off the page and ran down the hall. I could not stay. I had to go. And I get back to my car, and all my buddies that had been with me that morning were all standing at the car going, "We're glad you came back." You know, they didn't want to be there either. We were a little too far that day. And so we got in the car and drove off, and that was my last day at that school. And yeah, I almost died later that day. As I was coming down from the mushrooms, we'd been drinking all day, and I went into another blackout. And when I came out of the blackout, I was passing somebody on a 2-lane country road looking straight at an 18-wheeler. And I swerved just in time to miss him. I couldn't get back in the lane because there was a car there, but I went the other direction. And luckily, there wasn't a tree or a cliff or something there. It was a field and a barbed wire fence. And I just went through the fence and into the field and spun out and stopped. You know, that close. And I could sit here and tell more stories like that I shouldn't be here. You should have a different speaker. For whatever reason, here I am. And still that wasn't enough to scare me. I had been sentenced to AA meetings as a result of that court case. Had to get my paper signed, and so I started showing up at your AA groups. I was that punk kid that showed up at your home group, looking terrible, a mess, like I had just come out of the woods, you know, smelling terrible and drunk. You know, I showed up at your meetings drunk, and I asked you to sign my papers, and some of you did, and you guys put up with me when I was intolerable, and some of you were a little more loving about it than others, but you did, and I'm grateful for those of you that did that, and but you wouldn't let me disrespect your meeting. If I got belligerent, you asked me to leave and told me I was welcome to come back tomorrow, but I couldn't stay if I was going to be disruptive, and I learned a lot as a result of that. But anyway, so I came to meetings drunk, got my paper signed, and went and showed it to the judge. You know, I had lots of back problems at this time. Girlfriend on my back, parents on my back, lawyers on my back, the judge was on my back. I mean, it was bad. And I was carrying around all those bricks on my back and was ready to lighten the load. So, you know, I figured out if I would go to a few AA meetings and pick up chips at different meetings, y'all wouldn't know. You know, I could get a 30-day at this meeting and a 90-day at that meeting and go home and show them to my parents every so often or the judge every so often, and they thought I was doing good, you know. Whole time I'm drinking. You know, I wasn't ready, guys. You know, I just wasn't ready. I was still gone. And so anyway, I stayed out there and drank another year and ended up, you know, getting cut off from the parents and the family and complete separation from all that. And I did the couch tours of Montgomery. And then when that ran out, I slept in my car. And I was 17 years old. And, you know, I was done. I was done. And but apparently not enough. I drank a little while longer, about another year. And on July 4th of 1994, I went to a party, and I went into an 8-day binge, and I came to on July 13th. I was in the woods, and I recognized where I was, and so I knew where I had left my car, and I stumbled and found my car, and I was working construction, and I found my car, and I looked at the clock, and I was about to be late for work. So I drove and stopped at a gas station, went in, take a bath, wash off a little bit, and I went on into work, late. And, you know, my parents had been trying to help me this whole time, and I couldn't hear them. You know, I couldn't hear them. And my dad showed up at my job site that day and said, your mom found your stash. I had hit a bunch of, you know, outside issues at their house. And that's how I was supplementing my construction income. And, yeah. And my mom found them and destroyed them. And Dad said, she's made one last meeting for you over at Bradford if you'll go. And I don't know why I said yes to that. It wasn't like it was like any other day, you know, and they had tried and tried and tried, but for some reason at that moment, that day, that moment, I said, okay, I'll go. And And so I went up there to Bradford to talk to them, and I knew that if I was going to stop drinking, I had to have help. I knew that. I knew there was no chance. And once you say you're willing to go to treatment, they don't waste any time. No, we'll send your bags to you. And so, hour and a half later, I'm in Warrior, Alabama at Bradford, and in detox. And when they checked me in, I weighed 123 pounds. And I had just turned 18. My life was over, I wasn't even 21, and I already couldn't drink, And that's literally how I felt, was my life is over, High school dropout, family that doesn't want anything to do with me, and, dead end life. And I'm only 18 years old. What do I do? And I was scared. But the alcoholic ego repairs itself pretty quick. So by the end of my first week in detox, I had met a girl, found her, had my, treatment love. And, I was supposed to be there a couple weeks, and I had to stay a couple more, and they let me out on a Friday night. And I don't know why a treatment center would let 18-year-old alcoholic out of treatment on a Friday night. I guess insurance just runs out on whatever day it runs out on. But they let me out on Friday night. And I knew that when I got back to Montgomery, and my parents were going to let me back in the house again, and I knew that when I got home, there would be messages on the machine telling me where the party was. I knew it. The Craig got out of rehab party. We were used to those. And sure enough, we got home. I hit play, and then the messages started to roll, and I knew where they were telling me to go and what we were about to do. And I hit delete and went to the young people's 8 o'clock meeting. I don't know why I did that, but I did. And I went to that 8 o'clock meeting at the young people's group, and young people's was quite a place. They only met on Friday and Saturday night in the basement of a church, and it was a room about half this size, ceilings real low down in the basement, and they let us smoke, so you couldn't see, You could hear voices, and that was about it, You had to kind of wade your way through the smoke, And Harley Davidson's lined up across the front row of the church, and anyway, it was quite a place. But I can tell you, it was wild. I didn't know what to think, but I was glad to be there, and I didn't want to leave. I knew if I left, I was going to get drunk, and by this time, I didn't think I was going to live to see 21, and so I was scared, and I was ready to do something different, and so I just stayed in the meetings. I just stayed in the meetings, and a couple guys, they split that meeting into two groups that night, and one went downstairs, and that was the beginner's meeting. And they said, if you haven't, done the first 3 steps, go down to this beginner's meeting. And so I followed them down there, and a small group of guys 12-stepped me that night. And I heard the message. And I began to go to young people's every Friday, Saturday night. But they only met those 2 nights, and I'm an alcoholic. I need to be in a meeting every day. I just knew I needed to be in one. And so there was this other group that met during the week, and wasn't far from the other one, and it was called Metro, the Sole Purpose AA group. And so I'm going to Young People's on Fridays and Saturday nights, and now Young People's was kind of this fast, loose, traditions, they kind of matter, and it was a lot of fun going on in that group. And then, there was Sole Purpose AA group, Sole Purpose, big book thumping, newcomers don't talk, Alcoholics Anonymous place, And that fit my bipolar disorder pretty good, And so I'd get real serious during the week and study the book and go to meetings, and then on the weekends I'd go to Young People's and have some fun. And that's how I got sober. And I rode the fellowship for a while, I heard things like meeting makers make it, and I don't knock that slogan today. It certainly helps, but I can tell you that attending meetings is not the same as working the 12 steps, and it does not yield the same result, and I'm living proof. So I went to meetings and went to work, and I was too afraid to ask anybody to be my sponsor. and I was trying to work the steps off the wall, so I ended up with off-the-wall sobriety, and had an idiot for a sponsor, and received the gift of step none. And I was nuts, and I'd take my, they had me on all kind of medication because I was manic this and bipolar that, and I was a mess. And so I was taking my meds, going to meetings, seeing the psychiatrist, follow up from treatment, and I was just nuts. No sponsor, no steps, and I rocked like that for several months, almost a year. And finally, what happened for me was a friend of mine, some guys I used to drink with, were coming back from the beach, and they flipped a little S10 pickup truck going about 80 miles an hour, and it threw them both out of the car and put them both in the hospital, and one of them lived for 13 days in a coma, and then he died the day after Christmas. And these were guys that I ran with regularly. And by this time, I mean, if you drank like I did, you couldn't count on both hands how many people you had hung out with or ran with that were either dead or in prison as a direct result of what we did and how we lived. And this was another example of that for me. And as I left his funeral, I said, I was saying to myself, if I don't go get a sponsor and get serious about this program, that's going to be me. And so that night I went to him. The next couple, maybe 2 days later, I was at a book study at Metro on a Thursday night, and we were reading in Bill's story, where Ebby looks across the table from Bill and says, "Bill, why don't you choose your own conception of God?" And just like Bill, that statement hit me hard, and it melted away that intellectual BS I'd been hiding behind. Because you see, up to this point, it was all God's fault. How could my life be the way it is? And there still be a God? How could this happen? There's no way that there's a God. And I was trying to convince myself that that was true, that there wasn't one. And I thought if there was, he certainly dealt me a pretty crappy hand. And when we read that in that big book study that night afterwards, I was talking to somebody about it, and I asked that person to be my sponsor. And we started working the steps. And I worked. We did a third step prayer. We went into inventory and did a fourth step. And he told me to meet him at his house on Saturday, and we'd do a fifth step. And I did. I showed up over there, and I met him there, and I told him my story. And he said, "You holding back any secrets?" I said, "No." And I was holding on to two things. I had 2 graveyard secrets that I wasn't letting out. And he asked me, but I was too scared. I said no. And I held on to those for a little while longer and continued on with the steps. And I went on and we looked at those defects of character. Actually, what happened was a couple weeks after I did that fifth step with him, he relapsed. And so I was in it at this point. I knew I needed another sponsor, so I went and found one literally right away and picked right up with the steps and kept going. And we looked at the list of character defects and asked God to remove those and direct my attention to who He would have me be. And proceeded on to make that 8-step list. And guys, when I got to that 8th step and started making that list, I mean, I had Walmart, I had, little restaurants and pizza joints from doing Dine and Dash and Hog and Jog and gas stations where we had stolen gas and ran off and, things like that. But I was only 18, so I didn't have a career, a family, kids, I didn't have all that. So my amends list wasn't as long, but I still had some, and I had a sponsor at that time that wouldn't let me out of that. He said, "No, we're going to make these," and so we did. I had to go make that right, and I had to pay back Walmart and the gas stations and the Pizza Huts, and when we got to the family, how do I make amends to that mother that came to pick me up from jail and looked at me with tears in her eyes and says, why again? And my only answer was, "I don't know, Mom, but I got to do it, I don't know why I do it, but I know I'm gonna." And how do you make amends for that? My mom used to sit by the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning wondering what call she was going to get. I didn't know how to make that right. My sister had a lot of trouble in her life as a result of some of my behavior. And how do I make that right? And I had a sponsor at the time that just said, you show up and you become a brother to that sister. And, you call your mom every week. You go visit her. If she'll have you, go. And you be a son to your parents. And as the opportunity arises, you begin to talk about the past and own it and take responsibility for it and show them that through, the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're not that same kid anymore. And so that's what I began to do. And, I don't know that I did it perfect. There's been not much about my sobriety that has been textbook. I can tell you that life got a lot better. And at that point, my parents amended their will. And, I had been written out. And by this time, they're seeing this responsible person begin to blossom. And apparently they saw something in me I couldn't see. And that younger sister, they actually made me her legal guardian should something happen to them before they die. And I already told you about these other 4 sisters I got. So why me, right? You guys did that. That's a direct result of doing what you guys told me to do. And I was holding on to those 2 secrets still, and I was beginning to get sick in the rooms of AA. And a friend of mine and I went to a concert in New Orleans, and we were driving back to Montgomery. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were in one of these deep God conversations, and he proceeds to tell me one of these things that I was holding on to, right? One of these secrets. And I couldn't believe those words were coming out of his mouth, and so I had to tell him mine. And so I was able to match his story with one of my own, and it felt so good to get that secret out and off my chest that I decided, all right, I'm going to tell him the other one. Well, he didn't have the other one. So a little embarrassing, but now it was out. And so I get back to Montgomery, and I call my sponsor the next day, and I said, look, I've been holding on to these 2 things. It's making me sick. I'm going to get drunk. We need to talk. And so he went and met me and wherever, and he had the other one, I have had the privilege to listen to several fifth steps in the last 19 years and work with a lot of guys, and I've just yet to hear one that was really original. If there's a name for it, it's because one of us has already done it. And I thought I was the only one, and it was going to kill me. And anyway, so it finally felt good to get that out. And by this time, guys, I'd gotten a job 2 weeks out of treatment working at this little medical supply company, making $6 an hour under the table, working in the warehouse, shipping and receiving. And I had gotten my GED, my good enough diploma, and in first year in sobriety, and started going to school at night at AUM, Auburn University, Montgomery. So I was working during the day, going to meetings, working steps with a sponsor, had a home group, and going to school. And life was getting good, and it was getting good fast. And I was able to start saving some money, and I was able to buy my first house at about 5 years sober, and had a place, and life was really good. But up to that point, AA to me was my home group and a few friends and the fellowship, and my sponsor and a couple guys I sponsored, and that was it. And that's great, and it was a wonderful life. And what happened for me is I ended up going to the International Convention. And, San Diego was 95. I was sober by then, but not enough to go. And but the next one was in 2000 in Minneapolis, and I went to that one. And I had just turned 6 years sober, and I went to Minneapolis, and it blew me away. It literally blew me away. And we had a ball. Me and some other guys from my home group drove 24 hours straight from Montgomery to Minneapolis. We stopped and hit meetings in Kentucky and Illinois and Chicago and Wisconsin and all the way up to Minneapolis. We stood under the arch in St. Louis at 3 o'clock in the morning acting silly. I mean, we just had a ball. We drank coffee for 4 days straight, hardly slept. We were nuts. but we had a ball, and it was a lot of AA fun, and I got to tell you, when after that flag ceremony Friday night and that Saturday night meeting, when we all gathered in the stadium, and it got about this quiet, got so quiet you could have heard a pin drop in that stadium, and something in me shifted, and I haven't been the same guy since. I left that stadium that night, realizing that Alcoholics Anonymous was so much bigger than what I had experienced up to that point. It was bigger than my home group. It was bigger than me. It was bigger than my sponsor. It was bigger than the couple guys I was running with. And AA needed help to carry the message. And so I came back with a new fire in my belly for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was on a mission when I got back from Minneapolis, and I wanted to get a new sponsor, and I wanted somebody that was involved in service. I wanted to find the craziest, most involved service person I could find, which was Cushing, if any of you know Cushing. And he said, all right, do you agree to do it the way the book Alcoholics Anonymous says to do it? And I said yes. And so we met once a week in his living room. We started with the blank page, and we went page for page, word for word, line for line, and when it said pray a prayer, we prayed the prayer. When it said make a list, we made a list. When it said make an observation, help someone else, those are the things I did. And I don't mean just in the first 9 steps, cleaning up my life and the inventory and the amends, which we did all that, and I'd missed some stuff the first trip through. And but when we got to 10, 11, and 12, where it says, to lend that helping hand, and your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. I don't know about you guys, but I did those things and still do, and as a result, I got a lot of new people in my life, because that phone will ring if you make yourself available, I can assure you. And it meant many interruptions to my business, many lost hours of sleep, but I can tell you that my life became very, very full and very rich very fast. And so 9 months later, after going through this book with him, I found myself with about a dozen sponsees, a home group commitment, chairman at my home group, and CPC chair at District 8. And my journey in service began. And I had already served as GSR at a time when I didn't know what I was doing. But I showed up to the meetings and tried to talk to the group, and they didn't want to listen. But I then became CPC chair at District, and then went on to be their alternate DCM, treasurer, and then DCM. And when I was DCM, they asked me to sit on the finance committee at Area Assembly. And then after 2 years of that, they asked me to chair the finance committee at Area Assembly. I did that for 2 years. And then after rotating off as finance chair, they elected me treasurer. And then after treasurer, they elected me area chairperson. And then after area chair, they elected me delegate this past October. And I attended my first General Service Conference this couple months ago in April. And it's been one hell of a journey. I can tell you that my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first 5-6 years into it before that international, was not gracious. It was not textbook. I tried everything except working the 12 steps. I literally did. I tried, dating women in Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried, putting all my efforts into work and money and career. I tried, I tried everything except God and the 12 steps. And today I have that experience to pass on to other people that are trying to do the same thing. And my life's an example that just didn't work for me. And the 12 steps do. And so now I'm that service crazy person that wants to be at every area assembly, every district meeting, that wants to sit with guys that are new in the program in my living room once a week and start with the blank page. And the lives that I have been able to see be transformed as a result of this program is astonishing. And it fills my heart beyond measure. to be a part of that. I have ridden on airplanes to other states to walk with sponsees through amends with guys that haven't had a relationship with their father in 5 years, and I've seen that righted. I have seen, broken families reassembled. I've seen people get to live their dreams. I sponsored a kid that wanted to be a fighter pilot, but because of his felony history, there was no chance of that happening. And the cutoff for the United States Navy to be a fighter pilot is age 28, and 2 weeks before his 28th birthday, he got a call. He's now flying F-16s in California. And, I've gotten to be a part of that stuff, guys. It's just awesome. And, to get back to my own story, I'll just tell you that when I was, we've been together now 10 years. So when I was about 9 years sober, I started dating a wonderful woman. And we dated for 6 years. And on our 6th dating anniversary, we got married and had a beautiful baby boy of our own. And so I got a 4-year-old son and a 13-year-old stepson. They're precious. They are absolutely precious. And, those kids have never seen a drunk father. Y'all did that. And I'm very grateful. And, the careers, it's going good. It took off. I've been at that same company for the whole time I've been sober, almost be 19 years next month. And, I started out making $6 an hour in the warehouse under the table. I was employee number 9. A couple years after I started, we started a pharmacy division. A couple years after that, we started a billing division, so on and so on. And this company has grown, and I've grown up in it. And they've let me grow up there and be a part of that. And today, I'm vice president of the company. We've got about 150 employees. We sell medical supplies and pharmaceuticals in 33 states. We're going to do about $55 million in sales this year. And I run the company and sit on the board, answer to the owner. And you're looking at a punk kid that didn't finish high school, got a good enough diploma. And my sponsees, all the guys in my group, they tease me. They say I went from illegal to legal. And, God has a sense of humor. But that's what happens in AA if you're new, when you show up and do the work and you don't quit. And you just suit up and show up. Put one foot in front of the other. Go to meetings. Take the actions of the 12 steps. And pray. Pray a lot. And as a result of that, God's taken that mess of my life, that punk kid that didn't finish school, that almost died, that almost committed suicide, and He's turned it into the life I have now. And it hasn't it's been tough. There's been some bumps and bruises along the way, I've also worked with guys that just like the book describes, they made the supreme sacrifice rather than continued to fight. I've had to bury sponsees that couldn't fight this thing. And I had one a couple of years ago that I let move in and crash on my couch for a couple of weeks, try to help get on his feet, and I had to ask him to leave because he still wasn't ready. And within a month after he had left my house, they found him dead, and I had to go. I had to go look that kid's father in the eye. And try to explain to his father why his son was dead and I wasn't. I don't have an answer. The only answer I got is I did what you guys told me to do, and this kid didn't. That's it. It's the only difference. He was just like me. And I wish I could tell you that's the only one that we've buried, but it's not. So these days I'm taking alcoholism pretty seriously. as a result of new people in my life. And, you know, it's tough. But I can tell you that those experiences, they motivate me. They make me want to be a better man. You know, my 4-year-old, you know, he doesn't understand these meetings. All he knows is Daddy needs to go. And one night he asked me not that long ago, you know, Daddy, what do I got? I want to go to those meetings. Why can't I go? And I said, and I wanted to say, you know, because you got to be alcoholic, but that would have been a very dangerous thing to say to that kid. Because right now he wants to be just like his daddy. And I'm very proud of that. And so, you know, why do I sponsor guys? Why do I take off from work to come do these? You know, why do I devote weekends and endless hours to conference reports and district meetings and do all that? Because somebody had done it, like Don said, some of these invisible people did it 50 years ago so that it would be here for me. And I'm doing it so that hopefully it'll be here in 20 years if my son needs it or if your kids need it. So I'm a believer in the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they've changed my life. And because of that, I actually get to have a life. And I'll close with this. In We Agnostics, it says that the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. And because of you, the consciousness of my belief has come to me. And I really, really appreciate that. Thank y'all for my life.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.